Chelsea dropped to 13th in the Champions League table after losing to Atalanta by 2-1. But what's far more concerning than the result is the performance of not only the players, but also this man, Enzo Maresca. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down what went wrong. We're going to be taking a look at some of the tactical frailties that Enzo Maresca showcased against Atalanta. We're going to be diving into some of the mistakes that he made throughout the match, and we're going to be taking a look at what he could and probably should have done differently. What is becoming increasingly evident with this Chelsea side and Enzo Maresca, and rather concerning if you have any kind of connection with Chelsea, is Maresca's lack of ability to really counter a back three system. He has failed on a number of occasions to really understand the nuance that comes with that back three or that back five moving forwards and attacking this Chelsea line, and it's something that was really evident in this game yet again. Obviously, you had Atalanta operating with their 3-4-2-1 system. We've seen teams like Manchester United operate with this as well. Again, really managed to carve through this Chelsea side. But in particular with Atalanta here, what you saw was them really isolating those wide areas. In particular, the fullbacks for Chelsea, really preventing them from being able to be aggressive when Atalanta started to come forwards. And that was because they were overloading both channels very, very well. This really meant that both Achampong and Cucurella were really isolated and really exposed. And while you could have Badiashile come over and cross, and while you could have Chalobah come over across to try and help with that, what you really needed was one of the midfielders to come across and really help, and you also needed help from your wingers just to drop back and do their defensive duties. Unfortunately for Chelsea, they weren't able to, and they didn't do it on enough occasions for me, and it meant that Atalanta were able to then flood players forwards and create a number of dangerous moments moving into that penalty area. This happened time and time again against Chelsea. You've got Chalobah making a good pressing motion onto Scamacca to try and prevent him from being able to recycle the ball round. But look on both the left and right hand channels. You've got Lookman up here being really dangerous, and you've got Lara being able to then move forwards. But what else have you got? You've also got those movements down both the left and right channel. One from here in Zappacosta and one from here on that left side. It just means that Chelsea were overloaded on both flanks. So as the ball goes forwards, it then comes out towards Lara, who's then able to find a pass into Zappacosta. Look at how much space Zappacosta has, and that's because Gittins right here isn't making his defensive movement. He's not being able to come around and cover and help Cucurella enough, and that means that when they go forwards, he's got acres of space to then go ahead and then look to try and find a pass. He finds a good movement into the box, and he gets it to Lookman, who really should have scored. This happened time and time again for Atalanta, and they managed to exploit both the Chelsea left and the Chelsea right. The way Enzo Maresca and Chelsea were looking to really stop this Atalanta progression was begin to stop it at source, and that meant utilising a man-mark press, having Gittins, Pedro and Neto moving forwards onto the Atalanta back three. Initially, this is good, and the first phase of this press really did start to work. The second phase comes along when you've got Enzo, James and Caicedo pushing up onto Lookman, Edison and Darun, again looking to prevent those central players from being able to move forwards. You've now got this third phase of this press, Achampong moving forwards, Badiashile and Chalobah onto Scamacca and Lara, and you've got Cucurella moving on to Bellanova, or of course Zappacosta after Bellanova was substituted. The problem that Chelsea had with this was that if Bellanova decides to drop to try and help with the progression, the movement that Cucurella has to make from left back over towards to press the wing back is far too high, and it means that if there's any movement into these channels, whether it be from Scamacca, whether it be from Lara, it managed to move Chelsea around far too much. It gave Scamacca far too much space, and it allowed Lara to really move into that wide area, again forcing those overloads and pulling the likes of Badiashile and Chalobah out into scenarios and situations that they weren't comfortable in. It again allowed for Atalanta to get out, whether it be long balls over the top or even just a little bit of interplay with it, whether it be Darun or Scamacca. It was far too easy, and it fell apart because of that spare man and Cucurella having to cover so much ground and so much space down that right hand side. Without the ball and out of possession, Atalanta applied their own press, and this one worked a little bit better than Chelsea's. In the way that they wanted to go forwards, they managed to link up and mark up specific players. You had the wing-backs pressurising the Chelsea wingers. You had the front three almost pressurising three of the back four, and you had Edison and Darun pushing on to both Caicedo and James. But I know what you're thinking, that leaves two players that are completely free in both Enzo and Cucurella. Well, in Enzo's case, what you had was Kolasinac be really aggressive and pushing onto Enzo. And that meant that Cucurella was the only player that was free. And what do we know with Enzo Maresca and the way he likes to use Cucurella? He inverts him. But in inverting him, that's actually the biggest problem that Chelsea had. Because what it did was play into Atalanta's hands. The only free player that they have to be able to man-mark Cucurella was their right-sided centre-back. So in moving Cucurella a little bit more in field, it actually got him closer to the right-sided centre-back to be able to mark him, and it essentially prevented Chelsea's progression through a lot of the game, and that man advantage that they really wanted in the centre of the park essentially was non-existent. It was something that was really strange by Enzo Maresca, and the fact that he didn't notice this and look to alter or adapt his tactics was really problematic, and it played right into Atalanta's hands. So we know it didn't go very well. We know that Atalanta managed to stop Chelsea's progression. They suffocated them to a certain degree. So what should Enzo Maresca have done differently? For me, there are two avenues that he could have looked towards. He could have looked towards Enzo Fernandez or Marc Cucurella. Let's begin with Cucurella. What you absolutely don't want to do is move him into that attacking midfield role because, like I said previously, it's essentially doing half of the centre-back's job for him. You're preventing him from needing to go walkabout to try and find the last man that isn't being marked. The second thing you want to do is really move Cucurella on the outside, making those overlapping runs, and in doing this, you're overloading that wing-back. Because of the way that Atalanta would have their defensive phase, they drop off after their man-mark press really started to drop and fail. And when that happens, you need to make the most of that 2v1 advantage. The moment you do that, you're then giving yourself an opportunity to get crosses into the box. Late runners from the likes of Enzo Fernandez, Pedro Neto, João Pedro, and Reece James. You could have a couple more if you really want to, if you really want to commit forwards, but you're looking to really get those crosses in, low driven, but also aerially as well. It's through that overload around the wing-back that is extremely crucial. The second area that you can really look towards is Enzo Fernandez, and this is a little bit more difficult, but I think it's something that both Enzo could really do with, and if he would have made a substitution, or the correct substitution I should say, Enzo Maresca could really have looked to exploit. Kolasinac ended up man-marking Enzo for the entirety of the game, and it really meant that Enzo had the game at his feet. If he was to be able to move into different pockets of space and drag Kolasinac with him, you're asking a huge question. Is Kolasinac going to follow him? If so, you're leaving so much space, especially for the likes of Pedro Neto to move into that centre-back area that's been vacated by that man-marking system. But if he wasn't to do that, what you've then also got is the ability for Enzo Fernandez to create the overload himself. Essentially, instead of using Marc Cucurella, you could move him next to Gittins. And in doing so, you're then creating that overload down that channel and allowing for Chelsea to really progress and allow them to really get a foothold and create a different attacking dimension. Yes, it might not use the same principles or build-up play that Enzo Maresca would really want from his side going forwards, but sometimes you need to adapt. And in this particular case, I think he really did need to. The crazy and I'm sure extremely frustrating thing from a Chelsea point of view is the fact that they've already established they were able to do it in this game. Take a look at this. This is in the build-up to the goal that they scored. You've got an overload on this left-hand side. Yes, it comes through a corner, but you can still establish this piece of play using Enzo Fernandez, using Marc Cucurella, and building down one side. You've got Reece James, you've got Pedro Neto moving over towards this left-hand side as well, and you've got Enzo Fernandez on the ball here. He's going to play a great pass into Reece James. Look at where the wing back is. Look at how he's trying to commit to a certain position. He can't follow Reece James because of that overload, and he plays it in. As this comes in, you've got Reece James playing a fantastic low-driven cross into the middle of the box. João Pedro has got himself back onside behind the ball, which means he's still onside and can finish, and boy, does he finish. It's a great finish, but they've already established the fact that they're able to produce that down that left-hand side and overload that wing wing-back, but they didn't do it anywhere near enough, and this was the only real dangerous moment that they caused through those major overloads. Done it a little bit more, and this game might have ended a bit differently. Chelsea went into half-time 1-0 up, but they conceded early on in the second half, and as Enzo Maresca said in his own words, they lost control of the game, and the reason for that was what we've been talking about, their lack of ability to maintain that possessional game, their real inability to stop Atalanta from being able to progress forwards, and that's exactly what we see here. We see Atalanta drive forwards down this right-hand side. Now, Chelsea are actually in a good defensive position. They have enough players back. They have that ability to really start to press through forwards into these Atalanta players. The problem they've got is they're extremely passive. They're unbelievably passive, especially from Gittins here, who essentially just watches De Ketelaere move forwards down this right channel. I've got a little bit more sympathy from Cucurella because he's concerned about Zappacosta on that far side and if the ball was to get laid off to him. But it's through that progression that Atalanta manage to find a good bit of space, and they start to drive forwards. Again, so passive here. The next thing I want you to notice is this duel right here. Fofana is actually touching Scamacca. He's got a hold of him. He understands where he is. But as this play continues, and as this progresses, just look at the difference in space between the two of them. De Ketelaere drives forwards in that right-hand side, and it means that he's going to get the ball into the box. He's going to play a crossing. Now look at the difference in space. Fofana's lost Scamacca, and that is on Acheampong now to be aggressive, to be assertive. I'm not blaming him in any given shape or form because he's very young, but he needs to read that situation, or at the very least, give someone a shout. Caicedo should do better as well. So as the ball gets whipped into the box, you've now got Scamacca with a completely free header. The Chelsea players do not react well enough, but their passive nature in allowing De Ketelaere driving down that right-hand side just gave Atalanta a huge amount of momentum, and now the game has swung. And this is where we really need to talk about what happens next and what Enzo Maresca decides to do. Because as you guys know, I felt that throughout this game, it was at Enzo's feet. It was ready for Enzo to go and take it. But I believe the rigidity and the stubbornness in his system that Enzo Maresca has prevented that from happening. And instead, what he does is rather baffling. It's just incomprehensible, and for me, in certain situations, unforgivable and unacceptable. What he does is substitute off Enzo Fernandez and brings on Malo Gusto. At the same time, he also brings on Alejandro Garnacho for Pedro Neto and moves Gittins over to the right-hand side. But the substitution of Enzo Fernandez for Malo Gusto is just criminal for me. I just cannot wrap my head around it. I cannot understand why he's done this. When the game was there, we understood the way that Atalanta wanted to go forwards. We know how they wanted to pressure Chelsea and how they wanted to stop Chelsea, and the fact that he did that was just crazy to me. And it meant that essentially you're playing into Atalanta's hands even further, and that's because you're not going to see Gusto moving into those spaces. You're not going to see him going to go and overload certain channels. And you've got Cucurella still moving forwards into that attacking midfield area. It essentially means that two of your attacking midfielders are essentially fullbacks. You have so many fullbacks on the pitch here currently, and if we count the amount of players that could play right back in this side, you've got around about 4 players here that could play right back in Gusto, James, Caicedo and Acheampong. It's crazy. And then when we talk about the idea of Chelsea going forwards, you could argue that they want to look down the wings, Gittins and Garnacho beating the likes of Zappacosta or Bellanova and Bernasconi. But the problem that you've got there is if you cross it into the box, the players, as well as Joao Pedro, that you've got entering are fullbacks. So they're not exactly going to be the most creative players. It was a game that was screaming for Enzo Fernandez to be able to be let off his leash, let out of the rigid system and allow him to move forwards and create opportunities, or at the very least, bring on Esteval to bring that freedom, bring that quality to then allow them to go forwards. It wasn't the case, and it didn't happen. And for me, I think that is absolute madness. And in a particular case, I think he failed Chelsea. And Atalanta go on and they get the winner. And it's through what we were speaking about earlier. It's through that right-hand channel, overloading one particular side. And again, what have you got? You've got De Ketelaere in acres of space. I mean, look at that. That is incredible. But as well as that, I just want you to take notice of where Alejandro Garnacho is. and how quickly he recovers, or rather the lack of his recovery. Because as De Ketelaere picks up the ball and understands that he needs to drive forwards, remember, Atalanta want the win as well, so he drives forwards at this Chelsea defence. You've got Reece James looking to try and close him down. I'm not so sure it's as quick as he possibly could be, but what you really need is your winger to come and tuck in and give you a bit of a hand. And in particular, you need to give Cucurella a hand, because I've seen a lot of criticism for Cucurella here for not closing down the shot. And while I understand that criticism, what he's really concerned about is this overlapping run, which has been destroying Chelsea's left-hand side time after time again. And it's been a major outlet for Atalanta the entirety of the game. So he doesn't want the ball to go over to him. Understandably, you need to be a little bit more aggressive and you need to close down the shot. But what you really need is this player to come over and tuck in and give him a hand. And what's even worse for me in this particular scenario is he's slowing down. You need to be sprinting after that ball as quickly as possible. Your team is on the back foot. They could concede here. You need to be making sure that you do your defensive responsibilities before going the other way and looking to attack. He doesn't do that. It gives De Ketelaere so much space, so much time. It gets a fortunate deflection, but I think that's earned because of the way that Atalanta always look to go forwards, always look to progress. They were the proactive ones in this situation, and in that case, and in the substitution of Malo Gusto, I feel like Enzo Maresca was nowhere near as proactive as he should have been, and Atalanta get a win. It is a huge goal for Atalanta. It's a huge win for Atalanta, and it's a massive, massive loss for Chelsea. While they still might qualify for the next round of the Champions League, it is a systemic problem that they are unable to play against a back five. It's a big, big problem and something that needs to change. But of course, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you, so please do get involved. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.